Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks.
Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try to make your world a little weirder. I'm Niall.
And I'm Kyle, and I'm traveling through a series of tubes to speak with you, Niall. You have a tin can that is got a long tube stretched across multiple state lines, and I'm at the other end of the tin can. I have a tin can myself, actually. And it's kind of a fun sort of thing. Like, you string that across, I don't know how many states we're separated by at this point, but, it's like, I don't know. It's like, it reminds me of like having like a little fort when I was like a young kid, except I'm 30.
Yeah. I'm still waiting for a response from the Guinness Book of World Records people to see if we do have the longest tin can telephone in recorded history. But they're really bad about returning calls. They keep like citing labor issues and stuff. I think it might be tied to like, I don't know what it's tied to, but they will not get back to me. So we can't officially state that we have the Guinness World Record for the longest tin can telephone. But I think in our hearts, we all know that we do.
Yeah, I certainly do. I mean, you're handling the phone call end of things, whereas I have been trying to email Jonathan Guinness about our achievement. Mm-hmm. And I just keep getting these emails back saying, do not contact me, stop emailing me, I don't want to talk to you, things like that. So it's been, but I keep trying, because I think that our success, our achievement here is worth considering for Mr. Guinness's book. Personally,
I think so too. Like, especially when you sit down with your pint of Guinness. You really should be able to read about all of our exploits with tin can telephones. I just think that's a really important thing that we're going to be working on here, trying to get it wrapped up by the end of 2022, which is coming scary fast.
Yeah, yeah, a little spooky.
So it's very weird to think that we're coming up on 2023, which I guess we might need to see if we have actually finished our goal of those who stick around to the end of the show each week will have heard about this. We're trying to get at least one confirmed listener in the House of Representatives or Senate in the year 2022. I don't know if we've quite gotten there yet. I've got some calls in, but we'll see if we can figure something out on that and get some reports back from all the senators. Cause I know they're not doing a whole lot else right now. So other than forcing strikers to not strike, but that's another thing entirely. Kyle.
Niall, real quick, my man.
Yeah.
First of all, I feel like it should be said that we're recording remotely right now. I'm just gonna point it out just this one time that we're working on a remote recording setup. Just in case people are wondering, we're ironing out the audio stuff here. So I just wanted to briefly mention that. And Niall, I also wanted to mention to you that we have an email to read on the show.
Oh shit! Okay,
is that acceptable? Okay.
Yeah, I'm a little hungry, so this will really top me off and give me energy for the rest of the pod.
I feel like we haven't eaten in months, to be honest. But we did get an email from consummate listener Weird John, and Weird John says, "Hey guys, in the recent FYD." Kyle mentioned about a childhood memory of a Men in Black blacklight shooting activity. I have the same memory, and I have to know, was it the Men in Black laser adventure at Discovery Zone? Also, on a side note, I think Discovery Zone is responsible for maybe 50% of my childhood liminal space memories. Great episode as always. Always a treat to have Jules or Garrett on, so having both will make this an extra special Thanksgiving episode. Thank you, Weird John. I agree. Having Garrett and Jules on is always a fucking treat. And you personally caused my brain to slam into a brick wall in its thought process when you said the phrase Discovery Zone, because that is exactly what I was thinking of. Niall, do you remember me mentioning this?
I do. I didn't like, now that the idea of the Discovery Zone has been brought back up into my consciousness, I have a vague memory of this thing, mainly from commercials. I don't think I ever fully experienced it, but that is exactly that sounds exactly like what you were trying to get me to remember, and I could not have helped you. So thank you, Weird John.
Yeah, thank you, Weird John. There was one in the town that when I was living in Ohio, very, very little. I mean, I'm talking like 5 years old. I have a memory in the back of my brain of this Men in Black thing, and I absolutely remember the Discovery Zone, but it didn't become unlocked until the code word was put in front of my eyes. And so thank you, Weird John. Anyways, thanks for the email, and people, always be emailing us, please. We love the emails. But now I'll let you get on with your story. What are we talking about this week?
Kyle, are you ready to talk about some goop? Are you ready to talk about some globs and some goop and some just little wet mess?
Well, first of all, I'm always, you know me, I'm always excited to talk about wet messes. That's just kind of a thing that I'm into. Second of all, are we talking about a Gwyneth Paltrow sort of joint, or like what are we talking about here?
No, we're not talking about goop TM. We're talking about a more general form of goop, specifically to start us off here, some purple goop.
Okay. So this is not a candle that like says it has like this is not like a bougie candle that you can get that says this does not smell like my cock and or pussy. That's not.
This is not that. No.
Okay.
This is an entirely different thing. This actually ties a bit into an episode we did quite a while ago. But I would love to find a way to bring the Goop universe into the It Gets Weird universe, because I think that there is some cross promotional efforts there.
Yeah,
we could take in.
If Gwyneth,
what kind of sense could we?
Well, what kind of sense are we trying to bring to the It Gets Weird crossover with Gwyneth Paltrow? Did I read your thoughts there?
Yeah, the It Gets Weird X IGW,
okay.
It Gets Weird X Goop crossover. What kind of sense are we bringing?
Honestly, if I'm being fully honest with you, and I don't know, you might disagree with me, but like I think that Gwyneth Paltrow's already on the right track with a cock and pussy candle. But
I know about the one, but I don't know about the other. Is there actually one that is?
It's
I know.
It's like there was I only saw like a screenshot of it, but it was like a candle that said on it like I think it was like engraved in the candle. It said like this candle does not smell like my cock and or pussy. Something like that.
I knew there was a vagina smelling candle, but I didn't know about the other one. So that's interesting. Good for you, Gwyneth. I guess I say that, but at the same time, there are some things about Goop that are a little troubling,
a little strange
realm.
And just I think this is kind of the obvious choice, but I'm going to go ahead and say it because it needs to be said. We're going to bring the world the first skunk ape candle.
I think that would be really good. We do want to start with something really potent, because otherwise, some people would think we're not really leaning into it.
Yeah.
So I think that like the smelliest cryptid is probably the best place to start.
Oh yeah, it's like you clear a room with this candle, and do you remember the Capre, the like weed smoking Bigfoot? We could get a candle. Well, first of all, of course, you could get like a marijuana scented candle, right? You could choose your strain. You could be like, oh, I want this candle to specifically smell like White Yoda, and yes, there is a difference. And you could mix candles together to get unique scents. So you mix the marijuana candle with the skunk ape candle, and you get the Capre candle.
That would be. Have you ever? Okay, this is a very niche thing, but when you're for like high end like wine and even whiskey tastings, there are these boxes that you can get that have little like vials in them, and inside of the vials are these scents that are supposed to help you like tailor your palate to pick up on the like nuanced flavors and smells inside of these, complex beverages. I'm just imagining like an It Gets Weird candle box that is like all the like essence scents that if you put them in certain configurations create the different cryptids.
I would love that. I would.
So like there's like a swamp candle mixed with like a fur candle.
Yeah.
Gets you like the skunk ape, but then like there's a weed candle that you can use both for like some of the stranger cryptids and also the to get the copra, and like that'd be interesting.
Yeah, you could get like metallic and electricity sort of smells, like which like electricity sort of has that smell to it, and you can put those together for a UFO abduction experience.
Yeah. I think this is a really good idea, and we should see if Goop will sponsor.
Well, Gwyneth is listening.
Yeah, I know Gwyneth is a loyal listener to It Gets Weird. We get emails from her all the time that she marks "do not read," so we can't share them with the audience. But yeah, we'll see if we can get this going.
Excellent. But I'm assuming we're not selling candles today, and we're not talking about any of the shit that I just mentioned. And if you don't mind, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that this sounds like something that might be a crossover with my strange Skyfall episode.
Yeah, it's that and Atmospheric Beasts are kind of the reference points here.
Okay.
Because today we're going to start with I've got a couple stories here. We'll see what we get into. But we're going to start in 1950 in Philadelphia with something that has become known as kind of the purple glob, or something like that. There are variations on that name, but if you look up purple glob 1950 Philadelphia, you will come across some version of this story. And I do say some version because I've got a couple different things here, kind of a couple different versions, and we'll talk about why there are a couple different versions as well. So I'm going to start with as close to the original version of this story, which is pretty simple, as I could find. Luckily, I found a website that went into a lot of the kind of history of this kind of stuff, of this story specifically to kind of delineate why there are these different versions. But let's go ahead and start at as close to the source as I could find. So we're going to start on September 26th, 1950, in the evening time, around 10 p.m. in the city of Philadelphia, city of brotherly love, all that kind of stuff. Great to be here on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
So this story takes place. There are these couple police officers, patrolman John Collins and Joseph Keenan, driving on Vare Boulevard when they were out patrolling as cops, as they were supposed to be doing, when they saw something strange at like tree level coming down into a field near where they were patrolling. They said they described it as looking like a parachute about 6 feet across, and they decided to go investigate. But before they fully went in and like found the thing, they called in for some backup. And so they added to their crew here Sergeant Joseph Cook and his driver, patrolman James Casper. So all four of these men went to investigate this strange parachute when they found out that it definitely wasn't any parachute they could name, because what they found splayed out across the field in Philadelphia was this light purplish mass that seemed very goopy, and it kind of glowed purple. It looked like it almost contained some sort of crystal or something that was reflecting light, because their headlights are making it kind of really look like it's crystal, or like a geode or some kind of thing, like a lot of crystalline structure inside of it. But it was so light that it wasn't even it was supposedly not even bending the grass that it had landed on. So this is a very light, airy goop.
Weird. Now this is interesting because I did do an episode on weird shit falling from the sky. And So like and that there's not much more context to that other than that's what the episode was. Basically, there were different scenarios where weird stuff had fallen from the sky, and a lot of it was goo. That was, but this specific description, I was kind of like waiting to be like, oh yeah, I remember running into this when I researched for that episode, but I don't recall a bunch of officers seeing a goo that glowed and didn't bend the grass that it landed on. That is unique to me.
Yeah, this is a thing. There's a lot to this that we'll get into, kind of like the ramifications of this and everything, and like what this might be. But this is, as far as I can tell, the most basic, flat telling of the actual events as I could find. So like there are people that think this is some form of star gel, which I believe we talked about.
Yes.
In that episode, and we'll talk about. I've got some like what this might be stuff here in a little bit. So it could be linked to that, and that's kind of why I brought up your couple episodes here, because it probably is linked in some way to some of those things, or at least thought to be. But there's a lot of weird stuff with this that I'll get into that I really enjoyed. The initial, like, the most flat part that I'm starting with here is not the most interesting part of the story, and we'll get to the other stuff here in a little bit. But just to finish this up, one of the officers, Collins, tried to pick up some of this mass, this goop, and he said that it left this kind of sticky, odorless residue on his hand and kind of evaporated any of like the moisture immediately.
Yeah, honestly, rookie mistake trying to just immediately just bare hand pick up the purple glowing sky cum.
Yeah, it does seem a little strange that this guy's first thought when he sees this like weird purple glittery goop in the grass was just like, oh, I'm gonna like bare hand pick this stuff up. Even in the 1950s, I feel like people knew to like use a hanky or something, you know?
Yeah. This is a hanky scenario 100%.
So after this person touched it and it kind of dissolved into this just like odorless residue, the officers basically just stood there and watched over it for the next 25 minutes to half an hour until it had entirely just evaporated. It supposedly it left like a tiny bit of like residue, but nothing substantial enough to like even get like a sample or anything. It almost entirely evaporated.
Okay, I don't know why, but them just standing around watching goo on grass for a good 20-25 minutes is really funny to me.
Yeah, they just like were watching what effectively looks like a mass of like a Bath and Body Wash like hand sanitizer mass just like evaporating on grass for a half an hour. Like, I get that in the 1950s we didn't have all the forms of entertainment we had today, but it does seem like maybe there was something else they could have been doing.
If you recall, we determined that the only other thing people had going on prior to the 1960s in our canon is that it was hoop and stick or nothing, basically. So if you got a big pile of goop, you might as well see if something's going to happen. You've got nothing better to do. So just stick around, see if the goo does a trick or something.
Yeah, because if there's anything that you can say is consistent in this show is that we have no concept of when anything was invented or popularized. So these officers thought, hey, this is kind of weird. We're gonna try to like get something. So I believe they put in some form of call to the FBI to kind of try to get some sort of investigation happening. That didn't seem to go anywhere. They also talked to a local paper, which led to the September 27th, 1950 edition of the Philadelphia Inquirer, where there was an article that just the headline was, I've seen this reported two different ways. One way is that the article was entitled "Flying Saucer Just Dissolves." And then there's another one, which is a lot more sarcastic, that just says, "Pfft, flying saucer," like officers claim flying saucer just dissolves. One is like sassy as shit, and the other one is just very flat. So take that as you will. The article told the story as far as they had it, about these four officers seeing the strange object coming out of the night sky, and the thing just disappearing. Yeah, that is the most basic version of this that I could find. It is just they saw this thing, They called in backup, went to investigate it. One guy tried to palm some of it. It evaporated. They watched it entirely evaporate. Then they reported it to the news.
Yeah, they didn't include in the report, though, that all of the cops drew their guns on the goo and yelled at it to stop resisting.
Yeah, there were, I believe that there were about 12 shots fired in this case. No officer is really sure why.
They also missed the goo entirely with their shots somehow.
Yeah. One was injured, two were hospitalized. So there's a more, like, when I was researching this, it was hard to find that original version. I only found that like one or two places. Okay. Because this case has gotten popularized for other reasons. And the version of this whole scenario that has gotten popularized comes from a radio host named Frank Edwards. So Frank Edwards had a radio program called Stranger Than Science, where he would basically take any of these kind of weird stories from the time and turn them into radio content. So he had a penchant for really kind of, changing the stories a little bit, making them a little more interesting. So he would take in whatever the actual event was, and he would make it more exciting, change some details, make it more sensational to try to drum up listeners for his radio program. And I believe the story was told on his radio program a little bit, but then was popularized in his 1964 book called Strange World, which was 14 years after the incident had already taken place. And it changed some details, and it changed some details in a specific way, because between the actual impetus of this event in 1950 and his story being published in 1964, something happened that changed the public perception of the story entirely.
Go on.
And that would be the release of a little movie entitled The Blob in 1956, I think.
Yeah, I knew the original Blob was from the 50s, and even before we'd gotten to, as soon as you started talking about cops finding glowing purple goo, I was like, my brain went to The Blob.
Yeah, so that was 1958.
Okay.
The Blob, the original movie The Blob, came out in 1958, and because of the changes to the story and the sensationalized version of the story that is passed around, and honestly is the one that you see if you look this up, Frank Edwards' version, which I'll tell here in a minute, is like the more known version of the story as far as I can tell, to the point where there are what I believe are actually apocryphal stories of this whole encounter inspiring The Blob. And I have that story here as well, that of like what you will find online if you look this up. So this version of the Blob being inspired by this story, I found this version is from a Nerdist article entitled "The Blob from the Blob was based on a real life ... blob." Good title. Shouts out to Eric Goumeny for coming up with that one. And here is the version of the story that gets passed around a lot on the internet of this Philadelphia encounter inspiring The Blob. In the mid-1950s, a former vaudevillian and film distributor, Jack Harris, was trying to break into producing. He was trying to produce movies, and he wanted to make a monster movie because those were a pretty big deal at the time. And he wanted to make one that was kind of a little more spectacular, a little more sensational than a lot of the stuff that was out at the time. He wanted his to stand out. So he asked his friend and fellow Pennsylvanian, Irvin H. Millgate, for help. Over a middle-of-the-night phone call, Millgate pitched him the bare-bones story of a meteorite and a mysterious space jelly that crashes down right outside of Philadelphia. Though neither Harris nor Millgate, nor screenwriters Kay Lineker or Theodore Simonson, for that matter, ever officially confirmed the connection, they never denied it either. After all, it's hard to believe that the film was not inspired by the case from 1950, as much of the fictional Blob's discovery and description matches up with the real-life one, right down to the purplish hue. And also, because a lot of the people that were involved in making this movie were from Pennsylvania, there's an assumption that they at least had some memory, either conscious or unconscious, of this story from 8 years previous, and that led to some of the work that was put into this movie. So this is a thing that will get brought up a lot. You'll find, if you look up this case at all, you will find article after article citing that the 1950 encounter led to in some way to the creation of the movie The Blob.
Wow. I would have never guessed that there was something out there that was trying to pitch The Blob as like based on a true story, you know?
Yeah. I found that really, like, here's the thing. When I was researching this, I straight up in my notes for the last multiple days before I found this other source had it as this inspired the movie The Blob. And so I was just going to continue the party line from across the internet of like, this is how it happened. This story happened where these cops found this purple goo in the middle of a field in Philadelphia. And because the movie producers and writers who lived in the Philadelphia area had seen that 8 years earlier when they were trying to come up with a special creature for their new monster movie, they pulled from this little oddity that they remembered. And that's how it came about. But it seems like a lot of the details that The Blob, the movie, takes that it supposedly takes from the initial encounter come from Frank Edwards, the radio guy's version of the story that he told in his book in 1964 after the movie The Blob had already existed.
Wow.
So there's this weird telephone game across over a decade that leads to people now thinking that this inspired the movie.
That is that's honestly amazing, and I can't stress how often I run into, especially from like stuff from like 60s up through the 80s, how often stories are these telephone game just retellings of things, but with extra little details, and you get like these entire myths that spin out of them. It happens a lot with like the world of weird, honestly.
Yeah, because like there isn't it's interesting looking back. The more I look back at the early parts of UFO history and really just honestly the world of weird history, the people writing sci-fi stories were a lot of the same people who were believing in these things. And so the line between fact and fiction, or larger than life and fiction, is so thin because they both influence each other and go back and forth, and the same people are involved in the making of both of them. So like basically before the US government got a stranglehold on UFO history, it was entirely like it was based around a lot of like sci-fi and pulp writers. And I think that that's really interesting in terms of like trying to have any sort of cohesive narrative of it, because it's made by storytellers trying to churn out like weekly content for pulp magazines.
Yeah.
And I think it's awesome.
It's also like really like crazy to me how like you said, like so many things from the early days of like you could just think of like Fortean phenomena. How much of that is like somebody will read a sci-fi book and like start to spin that into their own like abduction experience or whatever. Basically what I'm leading to is like we still have this like crazy reptilian conspiracy that's now like just transformed into this like anti-Semitic dog whistle conspiracy with like these New World Order types. But if you go back and look at the source for all that, it comes from like a book by the guy who wrote Conan the Barbarian, right?
I think so.
I think that's what it was.
Not Ray Bradbury. Robert E. Howard. That's his name.
I think if I remember correctly, it was or if it wasn't Robert E. Howard, it was some figure like Robert E. Howard that had these like reptilian shape-shifting army that comes to a planet and like wants to enslave the people there, or something along those lines. But it came from like an old like sci-fi book, so but to this day it endures as this like really 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 like wide spanning crazy absurd conspiracy theory, completely divorced of its own origins.
Yeah, it's wild looking. Like the more you learn about it, it makes a lot of sense that people who are really into sci-fi and fantasy and everything also get into conspiracy theory in that way, the way that we have, because they're so closely linked when you go back in history, like at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you want to go through Frank Edwards' version of the story that is the more sensational story that you'll find on the internet?
Yeah, I would love to. I'm curious what this guy, how this guy ended up pulling this off, what his tweaks are.
This is the thing. Is like there are big differences, but okay, we'll editorialize it after I get done here. All right, so it starts with the same two officers, Joe Keenan and John Collins. They were making their rounds one evening on patrol in their patrol car when they were going down Vare Avenue towards 26th Street, and they rounded a corner and noticed a large glittering mass drifting towards an open field approximately half a block away. They wasted no time in just racing towards this unidentified falling object that was the headlight was catching as it was falling down to earth. And once their patrol car, like the way that it gets described here is they were like speeding, like put the pedal to the fucking metal towards this thing and then squealed the brakes on and like did like a fucking like
Akira slide.
Yeah, they did like a slide into the field and like got out of the car and like chased this thing down. It reads much more like a fun like sensationalized story here. So they then retrieved their flashlights and ran out towards the quivering domed mound of purple jelly as they described it.
Oh, geez, I don't like that.
They said that this purple jelly was kind of pulsating as they moved towards it, and it was glistening as the flashlights would hit it. It had that same kind of like glowing, glistening, almost crystalline kind of thing going with it. That does stay the same.
Sorry, Niall.
And
Can I real quick? I'm going to need you to go ahead and edit out what I said before. Second take on that on the response to the phrase "quivering domed mound." Actually, that's what I call my ass.
Okay, there you go. See, it's good that we're recording remotely now because it's easier to edit out specific things like that because there's no crosstalk. So now I can just make a very clean edit and no one will ever know that you didn't get that joke immediately.
Right, yeah, you can go back and make it sound like I had something really funny to say immediately instead of very delayed. Thank you.
Yeah. So they say that this thing was approximately 6 feet in diameter and nearly a foot thick at its center. So it was this like kind of like mushroom cap dome kind of thing. And they said the edges sloped down from the peak top of this glob, as Frank Edwards wrote about it in his book, in a chapter entitled "Police and the Purple Glob," which I think is a fun way of citing this. He says it tapered to a lip that was just a couple of inches thick. And when they turned off their flashlights, the men discovered that this thing continued to have this faint bioluminescent purplish glow that lit up the darkened field. Most disturbing to them was the fact that this thing seemed to vibrate of its own accord. They even claimed that the entity was oozing and like kind of spreading up a nearby telephone pole. So it seemed to be able to move.
Okay. This is the blob aspects coming out.
Yeah, you can really tell how these things got linked after this story. They said that as they noticed that it kind of oozing up this thing and it seemed to be able to move to some degree, that the police officers believed this was some sort of living organism. And at this point, they called for backup. And within minutes, James Cooper and Sergeant Joe Cook, who were in the original story as well, but were with them before they found it, like before they went and got up close to it, arrived at the scene, and they did a quick investigation. They found out that it was probably solid enough to actually lift, and at this point, the four officers worked together to try to like get around the glob, and Collins was the first to actually try to touch it.
Okay, and then they all got together and they played the parachute game that you would play in kindergarten in the gymnasium.
Yeah, they started just doing the thing where you like lift it up and you all run under it really quickly before it falls down so you're inside of it. Yeah. Yeah, they all just started doing parachute games with it. No, it's... Collins decided that he was going to try to actually touch it, and he found that it's this thing that seemed solid immediately broke apart into his hands, and tiny pieces of the glob remained attached to his hands and fingers. But within seconds, it started to evaporate, leaving nothing but an odorless film or scum on his skin.
I'm sorry, I can't.
So after this,
I can't help
ahead.
but keep picturing just like 4 of these cops with this glowing purple goo parachute, just giggling and running underneath it. While the whole time they're just like dropping their guns, and the guns are going off, and it's just pure chaos, and they're having a great time under there.
Yeah, honestly, this was really just like a kind of a hootenanny for these 4 cops. They found some glowing purple goo in a forest, and there were no people around, so they decided to let loose on and all of their fucking cop bacchanalia happened. You know?
Yeah, this is why the 12 shots were fired, but it's not because they were shooting at anything, and they would be embarrassed to admit the truth, but it was because they were so excited from running around in a parachute that their guns were falling
Yeah.
off their belts and going off by themselves.
Yeah. They kept like dropping their nightsticks and almost tripping
Yeah.
over them, but then
Yeah.
they would help each other up while all giggling and prancing around.
Yeah, they like roll on the nightsticks across the ground going, whoa, whoa.
Yeah. Oh man. I just there is a certain like whimsy to this version of the story because he makes it really is like a change in how he's describing the like goop itself.
Yeah, yeah.
That he's attaching a lot more kind of sentience and like living matter to it. So it goes from like, oh, someone found this weird like thin shit on some grass and touched it, to, oh, they found this mysterious creature in the middle of the woods and they all like had like a little ritual around it kind of thing. It just changes the tone of it so completely.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. I don't remember exactly what the phenomenon is called, but it's called what the from my episode about mysterious Skyfall.
Mm-hmm.
That was called star jelly, I think, right?
Yeah, there's a couple names for it. I've got them down a little further in my notes, but that's one of them.
Well, the reason I'm bringing it up is because the original story, the one that it sounds like it actually happened, maybe is like spot on for the phenomenon of star jelly, which is not living matter. It's some other weird thing, but basically that's an actual phenomenon that's been known to like happen for real. So I'm kind of reading it as like the mundane version of it is probably happened, but this version is a little out there.
Yeah, this version is definitely kind of like fan fiction where he added in elements of this horror movie he watched a couple years ago. It really is funny how much it was just like, oh, I saw the Blob. Yeah, it's this thing. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, something I read about the movie The Blob was like it was coming around when it was still somewhat rare for movies to be in color. So that's why The Blob was purple, was because they were like making use of the color technology and everything. So they made it something kind of unnatural looking. And whether that was like however they decided to make it purple in the movie, I don't know if it had anything to do with some faint whiff of a memory of this story or anything. But because they made the Blob in the movie purple, it just got like immediately smashed into this story.
Yeah.
And led to everything here. And so like a lot of the stories will even go in and talk about that and like talk about how then like this thing has a lasting cultural impact with like the Blob remake, and like one was even going into like, oh yeah, Rob Zombie's gonna make another Blob remake, and trying to all like tie this into this story from 1950.
Oh jeez.
And it's really funny to me how much like the need for content on websites now causes people to just like take all of this stuff at face value. And because you can find this story reported on 100 websites with no sense of actual like checking of facts or anything, no fact checking at all,
The desperation.
it just has become part of the lore. Yeah. So yeah, the last little tidbit of this is when they told this story to the reporters, they made it abundantly clear that they believed the Blob was a living creature, and that led to the title of the article being "It's gone. Flying saucer just dissolves."
Okay.
Yeah. So Frank Edwards wasn't the only person to kind of mistell this thing. It started just in Philadelphia newspapers and was kind of reported dryly, but as it spread across the country and into more kind of niche newspapers and reports, because like we're in the time period where like Kenneth Arnold was like 3 years previous, was in 1947.
Yeah.
So the idea of things in the sky is starting to spread around more. And so a lot of the kind of retellings of this story across newspapers around the country and in various journals and everything added elements to this, or kind of, whether intentionally or unintentionally, not intentionally, this story kind of morphed from its initial form into something much more sensational and trying to make it fit this narrative of extraterrestrial beings, because that was kind of a thing at the time, and that was just in the air at the time. So whereas like there was also this whole thing where we were in the the story kind of got swept to the side a bit as well because of the Korean War. So the Korean War kind of just dominated all the headlines at the time. So there's a thought that the police officers mainly were investigating this thing because it looked like a parachute coming from the sky, and it could have been some sort of like invading force or something. So there's a whole like weird cultural moment for this thing where it got taken over by the sci-fi community in the long term, but in the short term, it got like kind of swept to the side or messed with because of the Korean War reporting at the time.
That is, man, that's really incredible. That's honestly incredible. I mean, it's not incredible, but it's like, I don't know. It just is really funny that like we can have a purple dissolving UFO and it just instantly gets trampled over by news of war as it should be. But in a perfect world, we'd be more focused on, we wouldn't be looking at our phones so much, and we'd be more focused on the purple dissolving UFO stories. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that is like a lot of the stuff about this that has to do with the original story, Frank Edwards' version of the story, the way it got reported across the globe. And it's like morphed into this internet legend around the movie The Blob. But this isn't the only time purple goo has fallen from the sky. I found some other cases where similar things were found throughout the last, starting in 1979, it looks like, all the way up into the 2000s. So let's hit a couple of these real quick to kind of round this one out. The longest one that I found here was in Texas in 1979. So on August 11th, 1979, a woman named Sybil Christian was out in front of her home in Frisco, Texas, watching the Perseid meteor shower. I think that's how you would say that. And this was falling right at she was out there watching this meteor shower, and then she noticed 3 purple, seemingly metal-filled blobs on her lawn, which she claimed were putting out heat. She claimed that like if you got near them, you could tell that they were like very hot. She actually was quick to realize that they might be, important in some way or have some sort of value to them scientifically. So she contacted local authorities and asked them to take samples from her lawn. However, before the police arrived, one of the globs had already evaporated, but 2 luckily remained. They took samples and were then sent to analysis by NASA, and NASA did some tests on them and said that their results stated that it could represent some sort of organic life form, but the very next day they said, no, it's probably something more like industrial waste. So this led to some kind of back and forth with public perception on it, and especially in communities that would want this to be alien life matter. And it led to a NASA geochemist being quoted speaking about the case, saying, the blobs were found by Miss Sybil Christian on the front lawn of her home in Frisco, a farming town near Dallas. She described them as looking like smooth whipped cream, only purple. The blobs, which were about the size of a telephone and weighed a couple pounds apiece, were warm to the touch and contained small chunks of lead. One melted away on the lawn, but police took the remaining 2 to the Hurd National Space Museum nearby, and eventually one ended up in NASA. And the actual results of the NASA tests aren't readily available. They aren't like super public. But there are people that have tried to fully debunk this whole thing and claiming that it was just a glob of caustic soda from a nearby battery plant that was about 2 miles away from the Christian home. But this doesn't seem to have a lot of actual. When Sybil Christian saw the caustic soda, it didn't look like what she had seen. So a lot of people claim that this is definitely not that. So basically, it's inconclusive. We don't really know what this stuff was.
I wasn't prepared for how visceral the description of it being whipped cream would be.
Yeah,
that's weird. I thought for a second maybe I'd heard this one in my Skyfall story, but no, I don't think I have heard this one. And I mean, like, if it's if it is the caustic soda, like what? How would that even, like, do they have theories on how it would have gotten there? Like, would have just, like, did the factory chimney, burp it up like a cartoon and spray it on her lawn? Or, like, how does that work?
Okay, so there really isn't a lot of stuff like that. That, like, this guy, basically, his name's Ron DiUlio, and he made it his, like, mission to debunk this whole thing. And once he found out that caustic soda was a thing nearby, he basically was like, that's it, we're done, wipes his hands of it and, like, walks away. So there's no attempt at actually explaining how it got there.
Okay.
And yeah, it seemed to basically just be someone trying to wipe this whole thing away. And the thing that I wanted to bring up about this one in particular is the whole thing about it being around the time of a meteor shower, because when you're looking at stories of star jelly, or these purple globs especially, they tend to come around the times of meteor showers in a lot of the cases that I have extraneously here. I don't know for sure if the 1951 had anything to do with a meteor shower. That's not reported in any of the versions of it that I've seen. But a lot of these other cases do revolve around times where they're meteor showers.
Huh. Okay. Yeah. I kind of remember reading that. Also, if you're going to, like, test weird goo that fell from the sky, first of all, this is already a weird situation, but you better be goddamn certain that it is not biological matter before you start saying maybe it could be biological matter, because then you have created you have accidentally created a mythos there, right? Like that's already, it's established as soon as you say that.
Yeah, like that's the thing, is there are cases. Let's see. For this one's 1979, 1969 in Australia, 1803 in Silesia, which is a Central European country which is now in Poland, New York in 1846, Massachusetts in 1983 and 2001, England in 2001. Like, this stuff happens. It's not always purple, but a lot of these take place around meteor showers, and stuff just falls from the sky that's this kind of weird gelatinous substance. And so people think it's probably star jelly, but even, like, there's not even, like, a lot of good. I think there are explanations of what star jelly is, but, like, the number of times people have tried to test this stuff and it comes back inconclusive, probably because it evaporates so quickly, is just interesting. I don't know what to do with it. I'm not smart enough to know exactly what all this stuff is. But it's weird that it's happened this much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was one of the key things about star jelly, which is a provable, like, phenomena. It's just, it does, like, it's there and then it's gone. Like, it evaporates really, really fast. So it's you could probably explain all of this stuff with star jelly, but some of the descriptions and things are pretty weird.
Yeah. Like the one in Australia in 1969, scientists collected over 200 pounds of jelly-like material following a meteor shower. Like, sometimes there's, like, a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of the times it's just these like smaller clumps and, like, globs. But sometimes it's just, like, when it rains, it pours with this shit, and it's just all over the place, and there's so much of it. But then it evaporates quickly, so it's hard to do a lot of testing on it.
Yeah. There's also a lot of places will, like, theorize that maybe it's slime mold somehow. But, like, again, that doesn't really fit with the evaporation thing. So I don't know. The other thing that we had the explanation for in the original episode is that there were certain, like, vultures that would vomit up their stuff. and that was the one of the explanations, because like one of them was like meat that fell from the sky that was like, I don't know, they must have gotten some bad meat because they didn't even bother to digest it and they threw it up, is the theory. But like, I don't know, something more digested that like falls from the sky. And although I guess you're not going to get glowing purple vulture vomit. So
No, there's so let's get into some of the causes here, because I've got the ones that you're talking about, and I've got like one or two others that I think are interesting. Star jelly, also known as astral jelly, astromyxin, and something that a Welsh term that I'm probably going to butcher, but I believe is putra ser, which is Welsh for rot from the stars. It's according to legend is a substance that's brought to Earth via meteorites, and there are people who claim that all life on Earth emanated from a combination of primordial soup and genetic material carried by star jelly. So there's whole theories that this was like it was like a part of the birth of humankind. Reports of star jelly go back at least 700 years, all the way back to 14th century, when priest and physician John of Gadsden mentions what he called stella terrae, Latin for earth star, in his medical writings. He described it as a certain mucilaginous substance lying upon the earth, and even went so far as to suggest that it might be able to treat abscesses.
oh God. You'd have to try to find that out, right? Like that's what would you?
Yeah,
Oh.
he had like a boil or something on his skin, and decided to like scoop this like goop up off the grass and just like slather it on there and see how it worked. But that's the scientific method in the 1400s,
Yeah,
or
basically.
15th century, 14th century, so 1300s. It was also described in a 14th century Latin medical glossary as what they called uligo, which is described as a certain fatty substance emitted from the earth that is commonly called a star which has fallen. And so like it has throughout history been linked with meteorites, shooting stars, that kind of stuff, as either as poetic language or as like actually coming from the sky.
Okay, I see. Interesting.
So another kind of interesting theory that I don't remember if you covered this or not, but I wanted to bring it up if you hadn't, was that there are people that believe, since about 1824 in a volume of a philosophical magazine, written by Richard Taylor and Alexander Tillich, that star jelly could be explained away as the decomposing bodies of toads or frogs.
Oh, what? Oh God, I don't know if I ran into that. That's that's super weird. But it's like, I don't know. You'd have to have like a whole group of them just decomposing in one spot at the same time. But
especially with the whole thing of like them finding 200 pounds of this shit on the ground in Australia, like that would be a lot of dead frogs.
it's the largest suicide pact between frogs ever, I guess. Like,
well, they have some stuff here on like how it specifically forms. So it's not just any dead frog. So supposedly this is found when a kind of cut up body of a frog lying near a lake or very humid or wet area. So either in like marshes, swamps, that kind of stuff, or when there's a lot of wet weather, a lot of rain, lots of that kind of stuff. When basically a cut up, like a dead frog is decomposing in a very humid, wet environment, it can then start to form this kind of jelly mass that then, I guess, becomes light enough that it gets picked up and it can be found places, like it's in this article, it says, such as the top of thatched barns and hay racks. And yeah, so like if you decompose a frog in a very specific environment, you can create star jelly, and then that can get thrown around the earth, I guess.
that's okay, interesting. So, wow, that is a fucking truly bizarre, like truth stranger than fiction type thing,
So yeah, the other one that they claim, there are some people that tie this to atmospheric beasts, or atmospheric monsters,
Of course.
which I feel like there's specifically there's a paranormal author, Ivan T. Sanderson, who basically is a whole part of the theory of UFOs actually just being low density animals who live in the clouds. You talked about some of these people when you did your atmospheric beasts episode. There's one guy in particular that I want to do a whole episode on because I found out I in doing research for this episode, I originally wasn't going to do this particular case. I was doing something else, which is tied to a guy that you talked about in that episode named Trevor James Constable, who I think deserves entirely his own episode because he has ties to a bunch of weird shit.
Okay.
So we'll get to that eventually, but he's got a whole thing about atmospheric critters and atmospheric beasts.
Just
that led me to this.
Just to clarify, the atmospheric beasts are basically partly an explanation for the UFO phenomenon, where like there are creatures that live in the sky and they can float around, and sometimes they can be seen and sometimes they can't, and it's a whole thing. But go check out my episode on atmospheric beasts for more context.
Yeah, I believe it's episode 173. I actually listened through it a bit while doing this episode to make sure I wasn't covering stuff that you'd covered.
I thought so.
So yeah, that is a whole thing that we can. There will probably be a Trevor James Constable episode sometime soon once I get more reliable internet, because I want to do a deep dive on this guy because he's a disciple of the guy that was started the whole Orgone energy stuff, and also was tied to like all this other stuff that is just fascinating. So he seems like a true weirdo in a way.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, that is the case of the purple goo and the policemen in Philadelphia in 1950. Did it actually inspire the movie The Blob? It seems like no, despite all of the reports on the internet. But I can't say for sure because I didn't write the movie The Blob, so who knows? But I found this case really interesting.
The case of the policeman with the purple blob in Philadelphia gives me a lot of Star Trek, Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra vibes, which I don't know if you know that episode about the guy who can only speak in like metaphors.
I think I've heard of it. I don't think I've seen it.
So this is just another one of the many metaphors that you can use to communicate with them, which is the police encounter with the purple blob in Philadelphia.
So Kyle.
Yeah.
That brings us to a big question.
Okay.
And today what I've got for you here is if one of these people who had found this purple sky goop had been brave enough to actually take a taste of the forbidden jelly.
Cotton candy.
What do you think it would taste like? Okay.
No, oh man.
I'm glad you got there. So, because I was going to say, remember, this is supposedly extraterrestrial goop.
Yeah.
So Earth-based color/taste correlations are not necessily in play.
Yeah, okay, tell you what. The cotton candy was like a knee-jerk thing. That's maybe what I wanted it to taste like.
Well, you're thinking of it being such like a light, fluffy substance that is like purple and everything. So immediately going to a sweet, light, tasty treat like cotton candy makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I can see that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and now there is a sure test that they could have conducted to determine whether or not it would be a cotton candy substance, where they could have gotten like a paper cone and spun it and around the cone to see if it turned into a sort of fluffy sort of treat like that. But I imagine they didn't have any cones on hand.
Yeah, they probably didn't have a cotton candy machine. It would be really interesting to see if someone could get some star jelly and feed it into a cotton candy machine just to see what happens. I think that would be really some good science. Maybe we'll see if we can get that done, if I can ever find some sort of vendor for sky jelly.
Yeah. Now, so deep in my heart, I want it to be cotton candy, but let me tell you what it probably actually tastes like, okay?
Okay.
Do you remember the substance from the late 90s, early 2000s, GAC?
I do remember GAC, yes.
Were you one of the dumb children who put some in your mouth?
No, I don't think I ever actually had any GAC.
I was...
But I had fart putty.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. I forgot about fart putty. I had that, too. I was one of those idiot children who put some GAC in their mouth. And let me tell you something. It is a horrible chemically taste. And the thing that's disturbing about it is it kind of makes your tongue tingle for a bit. Which is, probably means it's not good to put in your mouth, first of all. So I imagine you would taste this and it would have this like chemical cum biological flavor.
chemical cum?
You know what I'm using. You know that the word "cum" here is Latin, Niall. Thank you very much. Okay, let's be real. Let's be adults for a second. Okay.
Okay.
But no, it would probably have a chemically thing, but you can taste that it's also not quite right. There's something to it, but I think it would most importantly leave that tingling sensation on your tongue, and it would taste like cum from a penis, probably also in a way. So,
fair enough. I think that they're like the chemically thing is definitely long because like when I first started, the like purple. The like kind of goopiness, the fact that it evaporates so quickly. The first thing that came to mind for me was hand sanitizer.
Oh, okay.
So I could see it just having that kind of like alcohol burn kind of hand sanitizer-y kind of thing. But that led me down an entirely different route of thinking that it might have something in common with some like botanically gin. You know, like I think that it might have some like juniper and fucking pine and stuff to it. Like I think it might have a lot of like kind of earthy botanical notes to it.
Okay.
That would make it kind of this pretty. It would be a pretty like I don't know, astringent kind of taste to it. But would probably mix well with some sort of seltzer or something like that to kind of round it out.
You're really
so I think. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say you're really painting a much more pleasant picture than I did, so I kind of feel guilty about making mine sound so gross because, like, I don't know. No. Okay, how about this? It tastes like cum, but like cum from somebody who's been eating pineapple for a couple weeks. How's that?
Yeah, if there's someone who lives off of a steady diet of pineapple, and I don't know what, there are probably other. Is pineapple the only thing that if you eat it, it tastes better, or are there other things?
I just know that pineapple supposedly, and but I also imagine that if your diet is like weeks and weeks of McDonald's, you're probably not going to have the most pleasantly flavored cum in the world. So I don't know. I haven't done my research on that one.
What if you subsist off a diet of like of Sky Gin? How would that work?
It's sort of like a weird Ouroboros of like flavors there, where like you're drinking the Sky Gin and you're. I don't really know where I'm going with that, but it made sense in my head for a second.
What if this substance, the thing that tastes like it isn't something. It's not so much that it tastes good to you, but it is something that aliens have engineered specifically to make any sort of sexual fluid taste better for your partner. So it's a thing that you like because they're way far ahead of us. They figured out pineapple thousands of years ago, and they're now going past and beyond that to be able to flavor themselves in other ways for their partners.
Yeah.
So I think that like this star jelly is really kind of a mix of like an aphrodisiac and something that actually like makes the sexual fluids more palatable to the senses.
Wonderful. Yes, I love it. I'm sorry. I feel like I kind of cut you off there. Did you have a final statement about your pleasant juniper gin concoction?
No, that was basically it. I was like, I just immediately after I got past hand sanitizer, I just started thinking of this time that I found in Muncie when we lived there, a liquor store that was like closing out a bunch of slow gin.
Oh,
you know what slow gin is?
I've seen the term.
So it's a gin that's flavored with a specific berry that I believe the berry is just called a slow berry or something like that. But it is purple.
Oh.
And it at least that stuff that I bought for a fifth of it for $1.
Oh God,
was not particularly tasty. Yeah, they were closing out. They couldn't get rid of it, so I bought a fifth for $1, and it sucked. So it ended up being the like punishment shot when we played like drinking games and stuff for a while.
Oh God,
yeah. So yeah, I think that's kind of where I got on the gin path for this whole thing.
I love it.
So I think that will kind of wrap us up for this week.
Cool. You wanna move on to some business?
Yeah. So if you want to find more of our show, you can follow us on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers from Stitcher to Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird and we're probably there.
twitch.tv/itgetsweird. Look, we're trying to get back to regular streaming. There's been a lot of technical difficulties on my end, but we do stream on Twitch occasionally. As of late, it's been me and our good friend Colin playing Elden Ring, so come check it out. We have a pop-in chat and stuff. It's great. And then email us, itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. Email us what foods make your cum taste better this week. I need to know. So
Send those to Kyle personally.
please
I'll give you his personal
No.
address. DM him.
No, you do not have permission to email or DM me that at all. But go ahead and email the podcast. So patreon.com/itgetsweirdlook. We know you like the show, but do you like it the right way? And the right way is donating to patreon.com/itgetsweird. That's the right way to listen to this show, really. If you're not getting it from a Patreon feed, you're getting it from nothing. We have a $2 tier and we have a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, you get access to our bonus show, It Gets Weird TV, where currently we're watching season 1 of The X-Files and we talk about it and goof about it. We also, at the $5 tier, you get It Gets Weird TV plus another bonus show on the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV. So you're getting bonus content every single week. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to our main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday. And you get access to our Discord where we're hanging out, talking with listeners all the time. So please donate to patreon.com/itgetsweird. And if you can't donate, tell your friends, tell your enemies, and especially tell your congressman about It Gets Weird podcast.
All right. Thank you all for bearing with us as we figure out some new technical stuff as we now live in separate states. And keep listening. It Gets Weird. Keep sharing with your friends. Thank you all for listening to the show. I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle signing out.